Hello there everyone, I am Mark 3 and welcome to a little guide video in Landinar, Into the Void, yes, and welcome to something which is basic, honestly, as far as the game is concerned. I'm not disparaging anyone.
Hey,
I wish these guys would activate properly. Yes. This is just a little guide video to teach the basics on ship design and construction. Notice in the background also that I'm running around in the starting station of Mordor Asset.
Yes.
There we go. And that is quite simply because I am showing the locations to buy parts in this station. For some reason they are split into 4 separate vendors here, though in most places, well, it's actually in one place. So, yeah, just going around and showing you.
Yeah.
I don't know why they're not responding properly, but hey, details. So yes, that is the 4 locations in Mordor Asset. You can get some basic gear here, and this one, by the way, is hidden, the one I just went to, the one in the back of Chrome. That one is hidden until you actually go into there, and it reveals that back room. You can just walk straight in, if you are so inclined. But yes. Now, we move on to the most important part of this, though. We move on to the ship designer. And this is where I'll give you guys a basic rundown on how to design and build a ship in Landinar. Because I must admit, I have been paying attention to the store page. And one thing that's been mentioning a fair bit is the ship design system is confusing people sometimes when they get into the game. It's like, not quite sure what they're going on with it. So, here we are. I have a rough approximation of the starting ship. I know the layout is wrong, forgive me, you know. But this is my save where I've got tons of stuff, so I've just loaded this in for convenience, really. So, let us begin the rundown. We have a ship. It is very, very shiny. It is also very, very small. But all of the stats you need are down here. So all down here, bottom left of your screen. We start off with tiles, which is how big the ship is. The ship mass, that is how heavy it is, and so how well it responds to little things like acceleration. I've just realised I've got to put a shield into here. But yeah, overall rankings for offense, defense, and the total for the entire ship. It gives you a vague idea of what your strengths and weaknesses are. Like, a really strong defensive ship is going to be hard to take out. A really strong offensive ship is going to be good at taking out other ships. And then the average is just like overall value of your ship compared to enemies. So, yeah, that's all those really tie to. Not as important, must admit. Now, top speed, reverse speed, side speed, and cruise speed. These are all derivative stats based on your engines. So again, not super important here. I will get onto that a little bit soon. And then we've got heat sinks, which is the heat dissipation capacity of your ship. It's a small number, but it is actually somewhat important. And again, I'll get onto that very, very shortly. So yeah. Anyway, moving on. Below this, we have 3 resource stats: power, fuel, and combat CPU. Those are the hard limits of what you can fit to your ship. And below that we have thrust stats: forward, backwards, and side. So basically that's how well your ship can accelerate in that given direction. There's even a handy dandy little green bar here which shows like average, good, and if we take something off here, oh look, it's all bad now. So the ship immediately changed to reflect the fact I'd torn off an engine. So there we go. We also have a last one at the bottom, which is rotational force. So that's how much force the ship can apply to rotate itself in place, which is basically turning speed. If you want to focus on a ship that's really good at turning around to track the enemy, then you want rotation force, because without any rotation force your ship can't turn at all. And yeah, some engine configurations can do that, so keep an eye out for that one. Anyway, moving on. Ship design. We have the basic ship. While I strip out all the parts. Okay. So, we will begin with making the ship movable. As you can see, stripping out everything has left all the stuff red, because it's like, this is really bad, don't try to fly this ship. Yes, so we begin with the avionics tab, which is all things related to flight and movement. Now, starting out the game, you will begin with a Cockpit Mark 1. If you mouse over it in the list, as you can see here, it will provide basic stats, and the yellow text is also a very quick overview of what it's meant to do. A cockpit, for example, can only be placed on a forward-facing tile of your ship. There can be parts of the ship in front of it, but it's got to be on an outer hull section here. So I take that and I can pop it into either of these two tiles on the starting ship. Notice it turns blue. If it can't go there, it goes red. So I'll just pop that in, and that allows me to control the ship from that point, and also provides me with 4 combat CPU. And combat CPU is a resource consumed by offensive and defensive tools. So weaponry and shields and, you know, that kind of thing. So you want to watch out for that one. Basically, the bigger the cockpit you can put on, the more combat CPU, so the more weaponry, the more defenses. However, you can only have one cockpit. That's why the rest of them have greyed out here. So you can't have more than one. I'm also not aware of any further ways to expand that, so yeah. Your cockpit is your best friend. Be aware of it. Then, next, I should mention this now, because it's important, it's tied to the cockpit. There is an auxiliary piece called a docking port. This is how your ship docks to stations, and if you'll notice, at the top right here, there is a list of needed parts saying install this, install this, install this. So install a docking port, install an engine, power generator, cargo storage, passenger seats. Yep, there we go. So docking port, you need this to dock to stations, so I'm going to put it in this forward area. Notice it can overlap on that tile right behind the cockpit. So that means I can put it there and save a little bit of space. So there you go. Some pieces can overlap if they are on an interior wall, and that is an important thing to watch out for. Then lastly, since I have gone on to maneuverability, well, maneuvering, since I've gone on to getting around the ship basically from that, so you know, a segue and all that, we've got the small interior door, which allows you to move from one room to another. You're going to need this, because if your ship gets in a fight, unless you are some kind of bullet-dodging god, you're going to get damaged. And as your ship gets damaged, rooms get knocked out, and so you need a way to get around so you can fix your ship if you need to in a given situation. So yeah, that's that. Moving back. Right. So yeah, you need a way to access all rooms, preferably. Or as many as you can if you're building a good ship design. Now, moving on. We have in the starting area, well, we start with this guy, a small chemical engine. I know it is a list of stats, but the rundown is this. The chemical engine is a jack of all trades, master of none, in many respects. It has the 1500 maximum cruising speed. It has side thrust. It has rotation force. It has forward and reverse. The whole 9 yards. It even provides rotation force, so your ship can fly with just one of these, if so required. So if I install that, look at that, we've got plenty of side thrust actually for our size. We can rotate to a certain extent. We have limited forward and backwards thrust, but we have enough to at least be mobile. So just that allows you to do so. And an engine, unsurprisingly, needs to go on the back of your ship. Though exactly where is up to you. Though it is also counterpoint to the cockpit and the docking port, which I mentioned earlier, because this one takes up a central tile completely. So you can't overlap this with other things like you could with those previous two examples. As a result, getting it on a wall where it's not in a corner is usually better, because it will let you fit in more stuff. But even so, it's still better to have more engines. Oh yeah, hold down shift by the way to install multiples. There we go. Like I've got 3. Look at my stats. Haha. decent, well, decent acceleration, but side thrust and rotation are very high. So this thing can turn like nothing else can. It is very good at turning. And turning is great. But let's just move on. So we got that. We've got the small ion engine, which only provides forward thrust. It provides barely any thrust in other vectors. It has no rotation, but it has a high top speed. So this thing has a very high top speed and double the cruise speed of the previous chemical engine. And of note here, you can mix and match. So put those together and it shows the highest possible cruise speed. Just note that beyond its rated speed, an engine doesn't actually give you any acceleration. So this chemical engine will only work when you are operating at 500 or below speed. Beyond that, your acceleration comes only from the ion engine, and so your ship will be noticeably slower when you get past that. So let's get back our original configuration of 2 small chemicals. Okay, now you noticed when these chemicals went in that a red bar appeared down here. It is the fuel bar. Chemical engines need fuel, and if you look at the top just below the name, it says -2 in red next to a little flame symbol. That is the game symbol for fuel, and it also shows it in the parts list as well, exactly what it's going to demand from your ship. So fuel, we need something to feed this guy. So for that we need a fuel tank. A small one is what we start with, so I'll just tuck that in there. That gives us 8. So 4 out of 8. There we go. Bob's your uncle. We have enough fuel for the fuel engines to run. This guy is now flight capable if we add a few more bits. So, next up, install a power generator. That is another one, of course. So power bar. We need a power generator. A ship always needs at least one. However, it can only have one as well. Also of note, more powerful generators, they get larger as you go. But for now, I'm just going to install the Mark 1. There we go. And that has disappeared up from up here. Now, that will provide power. So we've got 4 power. That goes to usually combat options like shields or weapons. But in this case, it goes nowhere. Oh, I should also note, by the way, some of the engines and things actually use power as well. Like the ion engine is -2 power. So that's purely an electric, while the plasma engine is a hybrid of the two. It doesn't provide any kind of side thrust or rotation. It's got the same cruise speed as a chemical engine, but it gives some other options. So actually, for demonstration purposes, let's go ahead and install one of each. So yeah, there we go. Each one looks different, and there is reason for that because each one has a different function as well, which I'll get onto at the end of this. So there we go, 3 engines installed. We have enough power, we have enough fuel. So, let us move on to the main use of power, which is combat functionality. So, combat. First and most important thing you kind of want is a shield. So, here's a shield. A shield provides a defensive barrier. See, it shows you how many hit points it has, and it also tells you how much combat CPU it requires. So how well you can defend yourself or arm yourself is, as I mentioned earlier, tied directly to your cockpit. So we'll do that. Notice, by the way, that the Mark II is more than double the shield. So in terms of shielding, at least, it gets better with each Mark. The power generation is also the same. However, the combat CPU gets more intensive, though later shields do actually demand more power as well. But they can get relatively strong relatively quickly. If in doubt, a single shield is usually better than multiple shields of a weaker type, though there are also sometimes resource issues as well. So let's take that shield and we'll tack it in there. Notice I don't have enough power now. Don't worry, we'll sort that in a bit. Moving on. We still have another 3 combat CPU. So, let's get weapon systems. We start out with the option for rocket pods. Mines are available in the starting shop, so we don't get one by default. We also start out with miniguns. which are here. So yes, -1 power, and there is a red wavy thing. That means this thing has heat. You'll also notice in the stats that it also tells you a heat generation rating of 10. So let's go ahead and install this. This is a side-mounted weapon, fixed to the side of your hull. So this is where ship maneuvering, ship turning comes into play. Most of your weaponry is locked onto your hull in a given direction. And in this case, they can only go forward. You can put it on the other side if you've got a spare wall slot, but I'm just going to put that there. And I'll also install a additional minigun Mark 1, and this is again for demonstration purposes. I'll add in a autocannon Mark 1. Notice I put them behind each other. They don't care. They'll fire past each other without a hesitation. They're fine with it. Though I will also add in the other weapon, which is fitted to start out, a rocket launcher. Notice it's pointing forward. I can rotate it so it can go in any direction I want. And I'm just going to tack 2 onto it there. So we've got left side, right side. I can fit them into the front as well if I care to. So this thing has a lot of missiles, though they are separated. So, but we have got firing arcs going off to in each direction. So stuff like that. I believe there's a tool for this. Is it that one? No. 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 Okay, never mind. I thought there was something that shows you firing arcs, but there is not. So it's just like where it's pointing, basically. Just take my word on that, it's where it's pointing. You'll see combat arcs when I get out into the ship. So, those are all the rockets. Notice that we've got more things though. Needs more power, needs more combat CPU. I have overloaded the ship, so... yeah, that's the thing. I'm just going to take out that cockpit and put in a better one. How much do we need? 7? The Mark II has 10. There we go, that's enough. Power. I'm also going to boost my reactor, so to find it. And we need 13 for what we've got. So we can't do a Mark II. We could do this configuration with a Mark III, however. So I will do that quite happily, and that's restored. Though also notice, by the way, our ship stats have been getting worse. That's because these weapons are not only draining from power, fuel and CPU, they are also adding weight to the ship. So every piece we add, this ship gets heavier. And that's another thing to bear in mind. This ship is not as agile just because it weighs more at this point. In particular, it's very, very bad at braking, so it can't slow down to save its life. So that is a concern. I'll go into avionics and I'll grab a side piece now. A reverse wing. So this adds a small engine onto the side of my ship, which can go in reverse, and it's specialised, so it's pretty powerful for its size, though there are better options. But that will allow my ship to slow down a lot better. We're also a bit low on rotational force because of the weight of the craft versus its rotation, which is coming purely from that chemical engine. But hey, we can't have everything. Well, we can, but, you know, we're not going to have everything. That belies the point. This is not a good ship design. I'm basically showing parts now. This is meant to be like a basic guide and walkthrough kind of thing. Anyway, moving on. We've got weaponry, we've got missiles. We need to finish this thing up so it's ready to fly. So for that we need a couple of auxiliary pieces. First off, it's demanding cargo and passenger seats. This is misleading. You don't actually need both of those. I believe the one you don't require is passenger seats. Yeah, there we go. It's fine with that. Also, there was something there, by the way. It deletes things in order placed from a given tile, so that's why it took the door out first. I will install a cargo pod, however, which can go here. And look, it no longer requires the passenger seats, so it doesn't need that at all. All it requires is some kind of cargo capacity. It could be the cargo storage, which, by the way, gives you a drone to pick up cargo pods in space, or it could just be a wall cargo storage even, though that does not come with a pickup drone. But that is the wall-mounted equivalent and only carries one cargo pod, versus the 3 that a cargo storage does. So, yeah. I mentioned the importance of corners, actually, so let's put in that thing and take out that. because there is one more thing we need to address, and that is heat. Yes. Remember the heat stat on the weaponry? Well, you need to deal with that with heat sinks, because in continuous fire, weapons generate heat. In this case, we've got 10, 20. You're the same. So maximum of 30, though these things can't fire together, I should mention. So we'd be generating at least 20. And for that, we need heat dissipation. So better heat sinks, they take power, but they dissipate heat. Or less wall-mounted ones. Now this is where I mentioned corners. Because the single one dissipates 3 for 1 power. The wall-mounted version dissipates 2 for no power. And because they can overlap, I can install 2 of them in the same space. So watch out for where you're putting stuff, because a corner like this is extremely valuable and lets me tack in those 2 heat sinks without any kind of issue. In fact, next to this gun turret here and this gun turret here, there is another wall section which will let me mount a couple more. So there we go. See? A couple of extra heat sinks. Got a ton of heat sinks. And this craft is... it'll serve. It's not the most optimum design, but it's good for a demonstration because it's got all kinds of stuff. The only thing is it doesn't have cargo storage, which is actually kind of bad. Its cargo storage is pathetic and it can't pick up loose cargo from space, but that is okay. I don't need to cover that in this guide. And I have mentioned the fact that only the cargo storage module actually has the drone. So you want to have at least one of those ideally, if at all possible. So, now that all the problems are gone, we could hit construct design straight away, or we can paint it. So we start out with selection of paint schemes, from the somewhat garish Ashes paint scheme, to the basic plated scheme, to Empire schemes, the Mardo scheme, which is the one most familiar to people who have been following this game during development, and even a basic blue SEC paint scheme. So different craft have different paint schemes, but we're going to keep it with the basic Mardo scheme. And now we hit construct. The game will think about it, and it will spawn it below the spaceship designer, which is down there. Now, for convenience, there are actually a couple of warp pads around the place, which will let you get to and from the design room really quickly, which are these green things here. So hit that, starboard, aft, port, and designer. So every shipyard has some of these, and it'll allow you to go to and from the designer really quickly. In this case, we want to go to the port side. So, if you remember, you always pass the port to the left. And that's a good guide on how to do it. So port is the left side, starboard is right side, aft is the back, and the design office is the design office. So there we go. Let's get into the ship, shall we? Because this is basically the last thing I want to cover in this design guide. So yeah, notice we've got the reverse thrusters on the engines there and there. This craft is a bit sluggish, and that's because of all the weight put in with low turning force. But it actually has a lot of acceleration forward. And notice the shield immediately got tested out because the shipyards don't open that quickly. Let's be honest. Oops. This craft is not very agile at all. But it carries a lot of weaponry for its size, which is the entire point. So this is the last part. Obviously, if I wanted to use my forward-firing guns, I just press space there to get that, then we would want to have this craft turning faster, being able to strafe faster, that kind of thing. So a much more agile craft would be more useful in general. But as it is, we can fire the autocannon right now. Yep. But notice there was no miniguns. Those are on group 3. So if I hit 3, that's firing both miniguns. This ship actually has more than enough heat dissipation, so we can fire those indefinitely. It's not going to care how often we fire them. It's just like, I can dissipate more than that. Just go ahead and knock yourself out. So I can shoot that till the cows come home, basically. However, I can't shoot them together. They are in separate groups, so that means that, well, they are in separate groups. There are benefits to splitting the weapon types for your forward mounts like this. If I was to fire the autocannon and it overheated, like your ship couldn't handle heat dissipation, all that time the miniguns would have been cooling off. So I can switch to the miniguns, use those, the autocannons will cool off while I'm not using them. So, and vice versa. So it allows you to have less heat dissipation and backup weaponry for different situations, though at the cost of fitting space on your ship itself. The last thing is the rocket pods, and as you can see I am fitted for a massive salvo. I thought there was a way to deal with this, but evidently not. All I can do is click and go, missiles! Missiles for everyone! Not the most efficient design. But I think that might be because I've got one in the forward bank. I don't know. But normally, yeah. I would recommend having the missiles firing in one direction for a massive salvo fire kind of weapon. Because missiles are one of your hardest hitters early game. It's like massive impact, go boom, destroy stuff. So if you get 3 of these pointing in the same direction, they work really well. However, notice they've got ammunition. Because they are a ordnance weapon, they have ammunition requirements. They're firing off 1 unit of ammo every time, which in this case is yielding 2 missiles each. They're taking time to reload, and then they come back again. Though, as you get better rocket pods, they actually fire more missiles per volley. So they get a lot more dangerous very quickly. The last thing I need to mention, though, is the burst mode. Or rather, yeah, I think burst mode is the name for it. Or is it booster? I don't know. So yeah, basically, your engine type choice gives you a booster type. And I believe by default, yeah, if you have an ion engine installed, it defaults to the ion engines one. Having other engines lets you choose a different booster, but it doesn't help. It doesn't multiply. So having multiples of the same engine doesn't make the boost more powerful. It only gives you access to that boost type, which you can reconfigure by walking up to any engine. If I had a side-mounted engine up the front here, I could have accessed it straight from there, but I don't, so I have to go into the back and get access to this one. Press F, and here we go. The ion engine gives me a cruise drive boost, which is gives me a much faster cruise drive. The plasma engine gives me a pulse boost, which gives me a massive burst of forward acceleration at the cost of my entire fuel gauge at the bottom right here, though it only has normal cruise drive. So, you see, massive burst, and suddenly I'm flying that away. And then it recharges and it's good to go again, like that. So that's what the plasma drive does. It is very good for pursuit, straight line engagement, or maybe for disengaging in a hurry, though arguably the most powerful one is the one that you get from the chemical engines, which is the thruster boost. And that's because this is afterburners, basically. You can use it to burn your acceleration and just call upon it when you need it, and it'll recharge when you're not using it. So it gives you acceleration on demand, though not as much as a pulse boost, and of course it does nothing at cruise drive. However, as you just saw, you can pop out and swap your drives whenever you like. So go ahead and change your boost drive as required. But yeah, that is more or less it, I think, actually, for your basics on how to put together and use a ship in Landinar. So hopefully this gives some useful pointers and sorts out some confusion in starting out in designing your own crafts of mayhem and destruction. Let's be clear though, that craft I put together is definitely a craft of destruction. It's probably going to get destroyed pretty easily. It's not the best. But it does demonstrate things quite well. And one last note, which by the way I forgot to mention, and that is the fact that if your shields go down, your ship's rooms start taking damage. If you have access to any kind of new design, you'll have noticed that this thing lists individual stats for your rooms, and the tutorial of the game covers this right at the start, basically, as well. But when a room gets disabled, all stuff in that room stops working. So if my rear section here got disabled due to weapons fire, I'd lose my engines, my shield, my power, and my weapon cooling almost entirely as well. I'd also lose access to these 2 rear rocket pods. So if I lose my rear end section, my ship would be dead in space. If I lose the front section, my ship would still be dead in space because it would disable the cockpit. So yeah, think about that when considering where you're putting stuff. If it's vital, keep it somewhere towards the heart of the ship. So if you are taking damage, your outer rooms take the damage first, and then the inner rooms can help to shield it with their mass until they get taken out completely. This one's a good one actually to show that. So yeah, if I put my power generator and shield in this middle room here, that means even if the rest of the ship got gutted, I would still have my shields able to recharge because they were in the middle. They would last longer than anything else pretty much. So yeah, just thought I'd mention that for completeness. And with that, we are past half an hour, and I think I've covered a basic guide on how to start fitting out and designing your ships. From here on out, it's up to you guys. So I hope you have fun with it. I'm just going to exit now because that will not overwrite the ship I used. There we go. I'm just going to construct it because that summons it to the shipyard, basically. So there it is. So yeah, this is 9.3. Thanks for watching. Hope this guide was helpful to you guys, and have fun doing whatever it is you want to do. See you all some other time.